Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I'm here at THEURGIA with a bunch of awesome theurgists. First, Cleopatra, then Apollonius, then Tony Mierzwicki, and I think that's it for tonight. Missing are a few of our theurgists, and we will catch up with them at a later time. As always, our muse has come up with excellent questions for us to think about and talk about. So I pass the scepter over to her to present the question.
Well, the topic that I was interested in from everyone is what are we doing in our theurgic practice just now? How are we approaching it? And then also what are we researching? What are the things that we're sort of developing? And this came about for me because I'm taking a class given by Gregory Shaw, who wrote Theurgy in the Soul and Hellenic Tantra. His class is hands-on theurgy. So a very wide net of people, a lot of academic theurgists, but then also practitioners in many different kinds of fields. A lot of psychotherapists and that kind of thing have come together to kind of have these conversations. And so we're all working together on figuring out how to do a theurgic practice. And I have a particular perspective being in the Western magical tradition. So I have specific questions that the class really hasn't touched on. So I thought I'd bring them here. So those are the questions. And for my question, actually, I've been very interested in Gregory's work because he is he has a very deep understanding of Iamblichus and how Iamblichus thought about theurgy. And Iamblichus gave us this sort of idea about the energy body. Gregory has kind of challenged the academic idea that as theurgists we are ascending to the gods. He talks about bringing the gods to us, experiencing the gods as ourselves. And I'm interested in the technology, the magical technology around that. So Iamblichus talks about the energy body, and I think the pronunciation is Ohema, but there's like a star body that you build up that has an energy. And there's kind of a metaphor that the star body itself is a temple. You stand in the temple, the soul stands in the temple, and then any spirit that you're bringing in also stands in that temple. So my particular interest right now is how does the interaction happen when you and the spirit are in that temple? And there's a phrase from Iamblichus that says, the eyes of the soul, I see with the eyes of the soul. I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? How do we see, how do we perceive spirit while in that state? And I kind of wonder if that maps onto the clairs, like the clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, and I forget the claircognition. There's a word for it. So is seeing with the eyes of the soul, is that clairvoyance? And then there are the associated questions. Then how do you determine that you have a genuine sight of a spirit as opposed to something that you're imagining? And also, how do you detect whether the spirit you're looking at is genuinely a god or a daimon or is a hostile spirit? And this comes up. This comes up in the class. Psychotherapists regularly experience people who have taken on foreign spirits, right? So these are all really important questions. And I don't have answers. I just have questions. That's what I'm working on. And then my personal practice, I'm actually back at a tantric practice. I lost a partner in the last couple of weeks, and so I've returned to a practice that's called Shandi, where I do Sanskrit chanting. So I'm visualizing Durga and taking Durga into my light body. So there's that whole set of technology there that's really well developed and extant, which is very helpful. So we don't have to develop it; it's already there. So what I'm doing is we do visualize deity, and then also deity here, and then projecting deity and bringing deity back. So uh, it's not just bringing deity in, but also bringing deity into the world, which is kind of cool. But that's where my practice is.
Thank you. That is awesome. And I can't wait to share my thoughts about that, but we'll move to Apollonius next.
Um, well, so I'm also in this class with Brandy and Greg Shaw, and I've certainly respected Greg's work for decades, and I've had a number of chances to talk with him about some of these things, and so it is very interesting to be able to interact now, because everybody is in some sense not necessarily a theurgical practitioner. I think there's about a dozen people in the class, uh, maybe not quite that many that show up each time, but so it's a small class, and it's it's an opportunity to interact with Greg and try and work through some of these issues. So I've got my own ideas about what Brandy was, or Cleopatra, I should say, has been talking about. It turns out I've been working on some academic papers, so this is sort of the academic side of things on exactly this topic, and my own practice, it's based in Neoplatonic theurgy, but in terms of the actual practice, what you do as part of the ritual, I have gone more to a sort of Jungian approach, because we kind of understand it better because he wrote more about it. And I think I feel like at least I understand the theoretical underpinnings of it better. And it's a little more contemporary, maybe, but so there's more a body of contemporary practitioners to learn from, either from books or in person. So, you know, um, so where do we encounter the gods? So, um, and this is primarily in Iamblichus, but it was a pretty common Neoplatonic idea, is that we have two subtle bodies. There's it's in English, we usually translate it as a pneumatic body, which is the lower one, and the upper one is the astral body or the luminous body. Um, but the interactions take place in a part of our psyche that's called the fantasia. And that's usually translated as imagination, because it's the image making faculty. But of course, when we say imagination, that immediately suggests imaginary. And that's exactly wrong. Because the imagination or the fantasia, so I try and use the term fantasia. Of course, that suggests fantasy, which is also kind of misleading. But the fantasia um, uh, looks and in fact is described as a two-way mirror or a two-sided mirror, and it looks in two directions. One direction is downward, using the usual metaphors, towards the senses. And so in terms of ancient psychology, it's the faculty that when we see something or hear something, it forms those images in our mind of what we saw or heard. It gets stored in memory. So when we remember something that we've seen or heard or smelled or had any other sort of sensory experience of, it's coming out of our memory and again going into the fantasia, but sort of directed downward. Now, what the Neoplatonists say, and this begins with Plotinus, he said, yes, that's right, but the fantasia can also look upward. It can look up into the realm of the Platonic forms, the gods, the noeta, uh, and in fact, this is where mathematics comes in. Of course, mathematics was very important to Pythagoras, Plato, and all of the rest of them. Is Proclus says in his work on the first book of Euclid's Elements, he says, when we're thinking about mathematical things, we have the concept of a triangle, but it's a concept, it's indivisible, it's a whole. But we project it down into our imagination where it's extended. So we have a picture of a triangle, for example, and it's extended in imaginary space. And then we can think about it, we can reason about it, we can do geometry and things like that. And then, of course, there are physical triangles which we can perceive, but that's the fantasia directed downwards to the senses. But if it's directed upwards, it's essentially forming an image of this higher idea, this immaterial idea. And so what Iamblichus and the other theurgists say is that's what's going on when we contact the gods. the gods are being projected from this higher realm into the fantasia, or to turn it around the fantasia, that mirror is sort of turned upwards so that it's getting these images projected down. Now, the gods themselves don't have a shape, but we experience them as having some shape. And this takes place um, the pneumatic body uh, is more concerned with sensory images. The luminous body is more concerned with these projections from the higher realm, from the divine realm. And they both are, the substance of them both is pneuma, this kind of like prana, but this substance, this subtle substance that forms the substance of our soul. Uh, but um, so the whole, all of these metaphors about polishing the mirror and stuff like that, it's to make the pneuma that is the substance of these subtle bodies more receptive to these images of the gods without distortion, I guess you would say. But and this came up in our last class, is Iamblichus says the images are a combination both of this downward projection, which is the gods essentially coming down into our luminous body, and also images from our memory and things like that. So it's a mixture of sort of the personal stuff and the pure in a sense of less adulterated with personal stuff. And I think, quoting Iamblichus, Greg would say, well, yes, I mean, the gods are always projecting down. I mean, it's always there in a sense. Um, but our perception of it may not be so clear, especially if our fantasia is more directed downward, or it's not, polished or cleansed to try and receive these images more clearly. So, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting, psychology there, and sort of even physiology there. And this is where all of this stuff about, the purifying the luminous body comes from, is to try and make it a better receptacle and a more accurate, if you like, receptacle of these higher emanations, which are always coming down. It's not like we're pulling them down or drawing them down. They're always coming down, but we can perceive them more clearly in our fantasia. So I think, then a lot of theurgical practice then is practices to sort of polish that mirror, so that it is a better receptacle. And so there's all of these metaphors about the receptacle, and all of this stuff. But it's to make that sort of that emanation a more direct process. Um, and we can then talk about how is the best way to train the imagination so that it's an organ of perception and not an just a creation of imaginary sorts of stuff that's has no real significance. Anyway, I've talked too long, but
No, that
got me going on what my current topic or
I
project
wish
is.
we had a show for every single topic you touched upon, and maybe we can plan them. But that was phenomenal. Please do not apologize for giving us such deep thoughts to think about.
Well, thank you.
Tony Mierzwicki.
Gosh, Apollonius, that is a really tough act to follow. I feel like I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I didn't attend the class. The class sounds absolutely amazing, and I don't know if it's an ongoing thing or just a one-off class that someone could jump in and join. I feel like I derive a lot of benefit from it. Couple of things jumped out at me out of what Apollonius was saying. Firstly, he was talking about working with the gods to like experience them, bring them in. That's basically what we do when we perform an invocation. My personal rituals, like for many, many years, have basically involved invoking the planetary gods on a daily basis, using rituals gleaned from the PGM. About a year ago, I expanded them a little bit on the recommendation of a friend of mine who's a Golden Dawn magician, and I started reintroducing the banishing rituals of the pentagram and the hexagram, and then invoking the particular element I want to be working with. At the moment, I'm focusing on Earth because I'm trying to get everything together in the Malkuth plane, and then the invoking hexagram ritual of the planet that I'm working on the day, and also the middle pillar exercise to get energy flows happening in the body and open up the chakras. So it's been quite an experience doing stuff that I hadn't done since the 90s, and I feel that it works really, really well. Now, I think it was Brandy was talking about the eyes of the soul. For me, like, it's well documented that we have astral senses. So as you go into the astral, you see things, you hear things, you experience them. So I would assume that the eyes of the soul enable you to see things, go into realms that would be denied to you if you were only in your astral. So we're talking about finer, higher dimension, higher vibrational realms that the soul can access that the astral body can't. So I'm doing invocations on a daily basis. I will also do ascension rituals, which seem to be a bit of a no-no in Dr. Shaw's class. But if you look at the Mithras liturgy, it is a rite of ascension, and I'm particularly grateful for Brandy, who came up with a way of breathing in sunlight to affect ascension. So she said that she got that from a Japanese temple that she was attending. You'll have to correct me on that, Brandy, if I've gotten it wrong.
Yeah, but it mirrors what Iamblichus said. It's in Iamblichus as well.
Yeah. The other thing that Apollonius pointed out was, as we practice theurgy, we kind of refine the body. We make the body far better than what it is. And that's the essence of yoga. Yoga means union, where you refine the physical body to make it a worthy receptacle of the higher self. So once you start looking into a lot of traditions, doesn't matter whether they're from the East or the West, there are very strong elements of commonality. So I wish I'd attended the class. I'd probably have much, much more to say. I'm just working on what Apollonius and Cleopatra have said. I'm still getting used to calling you Cleopatra, even Brandy, for
Both are fine.
decades.
Yeah.
But I'll get there. I'll get there.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. I'll try now to share my thoughts. I believe that we're already, there's nothing to ascend. I believe that we're from somewhere and we're here, and that our being here is vital to this whole process. And the best I can describe what we're doing here is a form of digestion. It's like when you have dreams, you have 3D sense-round experiences where different parts of you project and interact, and you could become very aware of what the dream is. You can become lucid if you know the techniques. You can turn a dream into an astral experience and so forth. But these things are going on whether our ego is aware of them or not. And a lot of it is just basically becoming as aware as you possibly can. And this is one projection, and it's happening here. And this state has certain advantages to be in, and it's very hard to put into language. But this to me has always been like a dream. This feels no different than a dream, and I can't see it having any other function than a dream would have through some higher part of ourselves. And I believe this part is already divine. and that if you're unconscious of what goes on an archetypal level, you live out the stories without knowing. And that's why human experience is very repetitive in some ways, and there are themes and so forth. And if you're aware, you could change the story, because the gods in a way are stuck in their stories to a certain degree. And they do take different shapes and different guises as we interact with them. And that happens in a dream, where the same dream symbol can appear in a lot of different guises. And also, if you explore different spiritualities, eventually you see that there are commonalities or equivalences between one mythological structure and another mythological structure. So, like, for instance, when I was researching the Unarians, and I've been interacting with them for over 50 years now, and they're like a outer space spirituality. And the Unarians have Greek philosophers and Greek gods among their many entities that they have interacted with and interact with. And I was reading their Atlantis saga, which I believe made up of 6 volumes. And while I was reading it, a spirit appeared and told me it was Herodotus. And Herodotus is the narrator for some of their Atlantis saga. So I said, "Are you the real Herodotus?" And he goes, "Well, are you the real Hercules?" And I said, in a manner of looking at things, yeah. And he goes, "Well, there you go." And this spirit has explained to me all the things I've been curious about that Herodotus mentions about Melkart, or the Phoenician Hercules. That is a very big part of what this particular lifetime happens to be focused on. And he answered a lot of questions that I had no answer to. Other times, Colonel Olcott from the Theosophical Society has appeared, and he's explained things that he did something once that raised the ire of other theosophists. So I asked him, what was that all about? And he explained it, and it made sense why he used those symbols and why it would raise the ire of theosophists who were there listening to him raise these symbols. So I don't know what real is in any real way, but I do know that these figures were able to convey information, and that individuals living here as waking people in this life have told me that I've taken on that role for them sometimes, where they've treated something I have personally said or something I personally did as some signal or some communication from elsewhere. So I believe that what Apollonius was saying was generally all true on some level. The fantasia does mean fantasy, it does mean imagination in Greece, and it's a picture-making facility that takes something that is beyond physicality and clothes it so that we can understand and interact with it and use it in some way. And the less conceptions we have that stand in the way of our apprehending what's being projected, the purer it is, and the more our brain can strive to get a greater perspective or a greater picture. If we have concepts that we're projecting up, then those will interfere with what it is that's projecting down. And up or down are relative terms. I don't see this as actually up or down. But the way you think of things colors what you're going to be seeing and what you're going to be interpreting as and what you're going to be experiencing. So the more you can clear your mind of concepts from systems, the clearer the communication will be. And the communication uses symbols too, because that's the way it has to communicate with you. And I don't know if I made any sense at all. That's the best I can do, putting it into words. So we'll take it back to Cleopatra again.
That was awesome. I'm in awe of Tony's dedication to practice. You're amazing, and throwing that many rituals in that formal way is an astonishing work. And then
It really doesn't take that long.
Okay.
It really doesn't take that long. I mean, the stuff from the PGM I was doing was fairly short, and I was feeling a little bit guilty that it was a bit short. So that's the core of what I do. I do some extra stuff as well, but yeah, it really doesn't take that long. And if you think about how long the day is, to actually devote, 20 minutes, half an hour to spiritual pursuit, I don't think that's overly excessive.
Yes. Yeah. I know from my teacher's practice that 5 minutes can be a lot for people. So you're
Yeah.
being humble again, Tony. And then Apollonius, that was I wanna take the transcript of this and just like print it out because that was just a great summation of exactly what I'm thinking about. And I kind of wanted to come back to that because you had talked about in particular the two bodies, the pneumatic body and the astral body. And I've been looking through Greg's work and there are times he kind of talks about it and kind of doesn't. I may send you an email and say, hey, do you have references there? Because it seems to me that there's more than one sort of star body or energy body. Um, One of the things that we run into is that there's a very complete technology in the Eastern system, and we appropriate that. So we talk about chakras and we talk about, the energy body there, and we don't get it right. It's very, very different in the system if you're in it, and very much more complex, right? So I'm trying not to kind of lean on that and talk about chakras and that kind of thing, and go to the again theurgic understanding that underlies the Western tradition, try to understand that before we go and make, comparisons. But every system that I study has some way of looking at the energy body, and they're different. And it's much more complicated than the Western understanding. So right now we have a Western understanding that's like the materialist, there's the body, and that's it. So you get the single body system. Then you get sort of this next step up, which is there's a body and a soul. All right. And you can, if it gets really complicated, you can say body, soul, and spirit. So there's like three entities. Well, when we're talking about the star body in the theurgic terms, there are at least two. So there would be, and where does the spirit fit? My personal like sort of working image right now fits that. You have a body that you physically incarnate. There is another body which holds the spirit, which would be the pneumatic body, and then the star body, which is the body that basically the soul uses. And my understanding is that between lives, you drop this body, and you also drop the pneumatic body, and the star body goes forward, right? And takes the knowledge that you have. Knowledge is what we carry life over life, and then manifests again the what you might call the pneumatic body and the physical body. So I want in particular to ask you, does that map out onto what you understand from Iamblichus and or yourself? How do you respond to that sort of set of ideas?
Yeah, those are really good questions. And the and the Neoplatonists didn't agree on this stuff or the other Platonists. So they were confused about it too. So I'll give you one version that seems to be pretty common. That first of all, they thought we had to have this subtle body because they said without some sort of body, there was no way for an immaterial soul to act in the material world. Um, So you might say, well, okay, what about our physical body? And they'd say, well, that's fine, but and this comes to exactly the point you raised, what about between lives? So that's why you need a subtle body, is that's what is the embodiment or the repository, the vehicle, okema, vehicle of the soul between incarnations. So the general opinion was that the luminous vehicle, uh, again, luminous or astral, or so two sort of different translations of two different Greek words, but they're both used for that higher body. It was immortal like the soul, so it would go on forever. Uh, the pneumatic body there was disagreement about that. So most of them seemed to think that it would survive the death of the physical body for a time, but whether it was just a short time and that might give rise to ghosts and things like that, of the recent dead. Or there's, I forget who it was, one of the Neoplatonists said, well, Plato has this whole story about, being reincarnated, you know, through multiple cycles for 10,000 years. And so the pneumatic body survives through that whole cycle and then disintegrates. Because they said they're both made out of matter, but the luminous body is made mostly out of fiery stuff, and the pneumatic vehicle is made out of the lower elements, earth, air, and water, but primarily air, which is why it's pneumatic, breathy. And so it would dissipate more quickly, but still some of them seem to think it would hang around for a long time. Now, then there was questions about, well, will we know anybody between lives? If we recognize any of our friends or relatives between lives, will we recognize them? Is there anything personal about these bodies? And then some of them believed, some of the Neoplatonists believed, again, with pointing to stuff that Socrates said in the Phaedo and stuff like that, say, well, we may suffer punishments, between our lives. And it's kind of like you got to have a body to suffer, so it's like you can't punish an immortal soul, an immaterial soul. So they said, well, the pneumatic body has to survive, so you can be punished. So, so there was lots of disagreement about it. And, now my own opinion, which is, you know, based on some of the things they said, but also, I should also say, we think of the luminous body as being rational. It's the higher mind. It's not the emotions. But Plotinus, if I remember correctly, said, no, 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 there's emotions in the luminous body too, and but they're sort of the more universal things. So my own opinion, and this is today, is that the luminous body corresponds more with what we call the collective unconscious. So it's aspects of us that are virtually universal among humans. Now, we all have our own genotypes, which makes us slightly different. Um, and I believe that there is some personal difference in the luminous body corresponding to that. So, in that sense, we are a little bit different, even in our sort of most universal aspect. And I believe all of the stuff that we learn and acquire during our lifetimes, most of that is in the personal unconscious, which I believe is effectively stored in the pneumatic body. And so I believe, I say today, that most of that goes when we die. Because that I don't think the pneumatic body lasts for 10,000 years. But why not? Who knows? I don't know. You know, um, a lot of smart people, and when people ask me about this, the one I usually name is the Dalai Lama, believe in reincarnation. And he is reincarnated. So, I certainly uh, want to have the humility to say, well, I could be completely wrong about all of this stuff. Because obviously, some very smart people have disagreed about it, and some very smart people, and I think very wise people, also understand that that there is a very strong kind of reincarnation that takes place between our physical incarnations. But anyway, so yeah, so these issues about reincarnation are very much tied up with the theories about these bodies. But they couldn't agree about it either. So they were confused also. So we're in good company. If Iamblichus and Proclus and Synesius and Damascus couldn't figure this stuff out, I don't feel so bad. Um, but this again is we have to kind of trust our own experiences, I think, in our theurgic rituals, if we, do any sort of spiritualist types of practices or things like that, I think we just have to try and trust our experience and be critical about it, but also take it as our experience. Um,
Wow.
I wanted to second what Tony said. He reminded me, I haven't done it too much lately. I've been doing sort of my daily practices, more kind of Qigong, but the middle pillar and the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram are really good daily practices, in my opinion. You know, and I have my own versions that I've made, given a little bit more of a Hellenic flavor to, but I do think these are really good practices that come out of the Golden Dawn tradition as daily.
Could I go off, could I go off on a little bit of a tangent from what Apollonius was saying? Apollonius was musing whether we would recognize people who we'd been reincarnated with in the past. In New Age circles, it's believed that we reincarnate with the same people. Life after life after life. And there have been accounts of people like in small villages who it's believed that they're descended from people who had lived in those villages, so they really hadn't traveled before. And for me, like it's not proof as such, but sometimes you meet someone and you've talked to them for 2, 3, 4 minutes and you feel like you've known them forever. And the fact is that you have, because you've had multiple incarnations with them. And conversely, sometimes you meet someone and you just don't like them. You don't gel with them. So either they're a nasty person and you're picking up on that vibe on them, or maybe you've had some sort of past life conflict with them. I think that once we start looking at New Age views on these things, I think we can shed a little bit more light on the more technical stuff that you were talking about. So I just, wanted to bring that into the discussion.
Thank you for doing so. And I'm going to add to that. Neo theosophy, not the ancient theosophy as much as the newer theosophy, Blavatskian theosophy, if you will. They said that there are 7 bodies. You have the physical body, then you have the etheric, not Aetheric, but Etheric, which is the pneuma of the Greeks. It comes from the breath, and it's part of the anima mundi, or the energy surrounding the earth, or the prana, and so forth. So that's one of the bodies. It's the body that you have when you're alive. After you die, the pneuma moves on into the world of the pneuma. And then you have the astral, and the astral separated into different levels: the lower astral, the higher astral. The higher astral is where the heavens are. So the astral is very much like dreams. You go to where you imagine or what you desire and so forth, and you're kind of stuck there until you could free yourself from it. So, and ghosts happen like in the lower astral plane and the etheric plane for different reasons. Like if you could perceive spirits, if you go into a bar and people are drinking, there are spirits that compel people to drink, and a lot of people can feel them. And in some places where violent actions have taken place, the violent action repeats despite the ignorance of people for that having happened in the location. And a lot of ghosts are described as being in loops. There are other ghosts that are able to communicate. And the astral and the etheric also contain the folklore entities, or the elementals. And you stay in the astral again until you grow past where you are. And that includes the heavens. Because how long can you remain in a place where there's milk and honey everywhere and light shining and angelic choirs playing? One day you're going to wake up and it's like, enough of this, time to go somewhere else. And beyond that is a realm of abstraction, the mind. And beyond the mind is the Atman, which is one with the Brahman. So that's how the Theosophists divide the different bodies and how they interact with each other. And again, we have different parts of us that can be in different places in different times. Just like here, when you go to sleep, going to sleep is an astral excursion. And sometimes you're yourself, and sometimes you're a different version of yourself, And sometimes you're somebody else, or married to somebody else, or living somewhere else, or doing something else. And while you're in that experience, you take it for granted. You don't question the fact that you're there doing those things. And those experiences are ongoing. And whether you remember them or not, some part of you is aware that these things are happening. And in the higher levels, it's described this the time being not linear. The time is a lot more fluid. So it is what we experience every night in dreams or in astral visions that some people have, or in astral travel, and so forth. So the reincarnation process doesn't happen linearly. It could happen simultaneously. You could be in a different place in a different time doing a different thing. And some part of you is aware of that, and some part of you is processing all of that. Seth Speaks, I think the series of books was called. They explain that in great deal, and several other people who created, I guess, tulpa or egregore type entities that communicated and got lots of their communications published, described this in greater detail.
Hercules, I love that you pointed out that if you're living in a land of milk and honey, eventually you'd have enough and you'd want to move on. I mean, for me, living in a land of milk and honey is the recipe for stagnation, because everything's so wonderful. You don't have to evolve. You don't have to change. You won't grow. You need a little bit of trauma in your life to become a better person in order to grow.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll bring it back to Cleopatra.
Our muse.
Yeah, but I love Apollonius's idea also that the pneumatic body exists so we can be tormented. That's just a great image. Uh, this has all been wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it a lot. I think that's sort of like where I am. I wondered where we all were in terms of our personal practice, and then also what we're working on, what we're developing. And it's interesting. The correspondences we have between the various systems. So yeah, it's helpful. I love the focus of this group when we come back to like the strict Neoplatonic stuff. It's very interesting, and we're among the very few people who are working on that practice. So I think it's important. But I don't really have anything else, Hercules. That was it for me.
Okay.
But thank you all for considering those things. It was awesome.
And thank you very much for bringing it to our attention, inspiring us to look deep within ourselves and search our knowledge, and to explore this from various perspectives. Now,
Can I ask Apollonius about his Qigong
Sure.
practice? I don't think you've ever mentioned that before. Hercules and I are both into working out with weights, and you're sort of coming at fitness from a very different angle. I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts and insights on the practice of Qigong and Tai Chi.
Well, I don't know that I can share too much that's useful. I as I said, I'm doing some. Well, I do a number of things. I mean, I do the threefold adoration that Plethone has as his ritual practice, and I do some prayers to my particular patron deities and to the gods in general. And so it's part of a whole sort of routine with that. But I use it kind of. I'm just a few sort of simple things to build up the energy in my dantian, mostly for health. And I kind of think of that as a kind of equivalent to the middle pillar in some ways. Connecting the whole channel of energy from heavens to the abyss, so to speak. Um, and so it's just kind of the habit I've fallen into lately. I did want to probably, since the original topic was kind of what are our practices, and I really didn't say much about theurgy, I should probably mention that I do what I would call now occasional or need-based theurgy. So when I feel like I need to interact with a particular deity because they're calling to me or they're you know, um, kind of messing around with my life in some way, then I will do essentially a theurgical ritual to contact them. But aside from prayer, which is considered a kind of theurgy, um, I don't do much ritual theurgical practice except on a sort of a occasional basis. But yeah, I've done some Tai Chi. I would like to get back into it. My wife and I have both talked about it lately, and we were doing it for a while, and for one reason or another, we stopped. Um, but I think these are very good practices, and obviously I'm not shy about borrowing things from other traditions that um, especially where they're living traditions, where we have a lot of theory. I will say in Neoplatonism, um, but I like to look at some of the more living traditions to find out, okay, that's fine. How do you actually do it? What do we need to be doing here? And so I found Qigong, and I found also Tibetan Buddhism to be very informative for me, and although I don't consider myself a practicing Buddhist, but aside from just meditating, I've worked on various practices of deity yoga from the Tibetan Buddhist traditions. And yeah, it's I don't have the discipline I would like to have, but you just do what you can do, I guess. But I do pretty much have mostly in the night time, I do a ritual that I don't know, it doesn't take too long. It probably takes about 20 minutes. And I pretty faithfully do that, even if I'm traveling and stuff like that.
I wanted to know a little bit more. You said something about having a lesser banishing ritual or that had a Hellenic, more of a Hellenic focus. I'd love to see like that ritual.
Okay, well, it's very easy. It's actually in the Bibliotheca Arcana. It's been there since 1995 or something like that. But I've also published, so you can find it online, is what I'm saying. I've also got another ritual which was intended as kind of a Hellenic version of the middle pillar, and it's an Orphic descent, and I there's also it was supposed to have an ascent that went with it, and the ascent is is also in the Bibliotheca Arcana, but I'd never put the ascent up there. And people kept writing to me about it and saying, "Well, this is great, but there's a link to continue on to the ascent and it's not there. So I finally wrote it up, and so it's published as a book. Actually, it's called the Orphic Holodemiurgia. So it's and Brandy, especially being in Greg's class, will know that this sort of the central idea is that we're taking on the role of the gods in terms of the demiurge, in terms of manifesting divinity in material reality. And so that's where the holodemiurgia comes from. In this ritual, you create the entire universe from first principle, uh, phanes, basically. You create the whole universe down into material reality, and that's the descent. And then the ascent is then going from basic sort of physical materiality back up towards the Neoplatonic one. And so that's online, or that's a book you can buy either in a Kindle version or in a hard copy version, and it's called the Orphic Holodemiurgia. Uh, and So there's that descent and ascent is the basic part of the book, but then there's an appendix that gives the lesser banishing ritual. I call it the Olympic banishing ritual. Um, and both of those rituals, I present the ritual in a form that you can perform it. And but then I have it, I repeat the whole thing again, fully annotated, so you know where all of the stuff comes from, so it's all based in ancient philosophy and mythology, and with occasional inventions of my own, but I make it clear, what I'm doing in all of those cases. So you can, and I give you different versions of it and stuff like that. So anyway, that's there, and it's a practice. If I remember right, I haven't done it too recently. I actually did it in a class, I don't know, probably about 6 months ago, and I think it takes, probably a half an hour or 45 minutes to go through the descent and the ascent. Uh, and I would like to get back to doing that more regularly. I should say something else I do fairly regularly is the invocation of Hermes from PGM 8. I really like that ritual. And I do that mentally sometimes. So I've got it internalized. So I don't have to do any of the motions or anything. I can just, in bed or just in a meditative situation, I can just go through it. And those are both two rituals I would like to get back to doing more regularly, not necessarily daily, but on a more regular basis. So yeah, look up the Orphic Holodemiurgia. Like I said, you can find earlier versions in the Bibliotheca Arcana, but the full thing is you can get the Kindle book or something like that, and
Can you send me a link to what that's?
or I can send it to you. I mean,
That's
you're
basically
right, anyhow. I'll send it to you.
I have the link
What-
in the
what you-
chat. I'm
what
not
you-
sure
Oh,
whether
okay.
the recording that you upload to YouTube will have it, but I have the link in the chat to the
Oh,
Orphic
okay.
Demiurgia.
Great.
I
So
saw that
before you hit stop, go click on the chat and you can bring it up.
Yeah, I saw that you had sent something, but even with my
Yeah.
glasses, I couldn't read it, and I figured if I sit there going like this with a magnifying glass, it would look really weird on YouTube. So, okay, thank you. And we're coming to the end of today's conversation, which saddens me. But I enjoyed speaking there very much. Apollonius, what you described is very close to how I perceive existence. I believe that we're creating this, but the only difference is there's no anavasis and katavasis. It's all part of the same process. So it's connected and it's not a different higher or lower thing. It's just the process of digesting experience, if you will. Not experiences we understand, but on some higher level that would make sense to whatever is digesting through us. So how can people contact you, Cleopatra?
So my pagan name is Brandy Williams, and I'm on Facebook. I have brandywilliamsauthor.com as a webpage. I don't respond well, but you can read my stuff at brandywilliamsauthor.com, or you can go on Amazon and look for the works of Brandy Williams. I'll be at Babylon Rising in June, so you could connect with me there. Actually, next weekend I'm going to Spirit Northwest. So if anybody listening to this goes to Spirit Northwest, I'm going to be there as well.
And please feel free to advertise your appearances, all of you, on my webpage. Apollonius, how can people enter your wonderful and expanded universe? And
Probably the best way is to go to my website. It's HTTP opsopaus.com, opsopaus.com. And you may have to do some hunting, but the various books I've written are all listed there, and copies of presentations that I've been giving, and other sorts of information and stuff like that. And you can email me through that website, and that's probably the way I'm most responsive. I am on Facebook as John Opsopaus, but I'm not that active on Facebook, so it's probably easier to get a hold of me through my website. And I will be at Mystic South in July, and I'll be doing a presentation on ancient ritual magic, mostly drawn from the Greek magical papyri. And I should show you my icon cards that
oh,
I have
awesome.
printed. These are the gods of Plethon as icon cards that you can used for contemplation. And you can find out about them on opsopaus.com.
And I offer this, I've offered it before and we've done it before, but I'll offer it again. Whenever any of you publishes anything, whether it be through your own publishing houses or Llewellyn or someplace else, let me know. I'd be more than happy to devote a show just to your new project or your new publication. And you can use it any way you want for people to learn about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Tony Mierzwicki.
Last time I caught up with Apollonius was at Paganicon, and one thing that I said to him privately, but I'd like to say publicly, is I'm really excited about the work that he's done with Plethon. He has resurrected an ancient path, and we're talking about something that, well, is pretty well new for most of us. You know, possibly old for some academics, but he's actually brought it into the public domain, and it's something that will outlive him, and I'm really, really excited by it. So I'm also going to be at Mystic South with Apollonius again. I feel like I'm stalking him. Best way to contact me is through Facebook, and I also have a blog through Patheos, which I have been neglecting for the last couple of months or so, but I have to get back into it. I've got a couple of book reviews that I need to upload. But I'm glad that we're all starting to meet up a lot more, do presentations together and interact together. I would love to have another shot at doing the panel that we did, which didn't quite work out as well as it should have when we had all 7 of us promoting the book. I would love to be able to do something like that again.
Would you like to? We could set aside if we can do our version of it and keep it up for as long as the YouTube channels exist. And I give you permission to put it on your channels too. And this way, it's available to anybody, even if they didn't go to the convention.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. I mean, we've had private discussions with Cleo where had we been accepted for Mystic South, we would have been limited to 3 minutes, 4 minutes at the very most to talk about our essays. So if we have a full hour, we're going to have substantially more time, probably 7 or 8 minutes each, to talk about our own contributions, our own thoughts. And that'd be quite an amazing episode if we could make it happen, have all 7 of us. And it would be, like you said, it'd be up there forever.
Guys, Apollonius, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
we got everyone together once. Hopefully we can do it again. We might have to
yeah,
pick
even
time of
Jean-Louis
day.
at the very last minute, jumped on from Paris, and Cleo from her hospital room.
Yeah.
So we could definitely make it happen. And
I would love to do it properly. I mean, we had all sorts of technical issues and a number of people left the event. So to have actually everything together here and do it right would be amazing.
And we could plan it ahead of time and let's make it happen. Let's make it a joint project. And I like Tony's sharing that there are bands of people who incarnate together throughout time. And I'd like to think that we're part of such a band and that we've been having these conversations since at least antiquity and we'll continue to have throughout time. I'm very blessed to know you all. You're awesome individuals and you're historic individuals. I really believe that. And I look forward to our next conversation. Blessings to you all.
Blessings to you too.
Thanks.